Imagine a car with no front passenger seat that was built by a military contractor in the same plant as the H2 Hummer and drew concern from the Chrysler Corporation. This car is real, and you've probably seen it before, but you probably didn't know what this car was. Why does this weird looking car exist? What is its story? Well, you have clicked on the right video because this is the story of the VPG MV-1. We begin our story with this, the standard taxi prototype. The standard taxi, which was a precursor to the MV-1, was unveiled to the world in 2005 at the International Association of Transportation Regulators Conference. This prototype would continue around the auto show circuit through about 2007. While the standard taxi was ridiculed for its looks, people noted the highly functional layout of the vehicle, which drew inspiration from the London black cab. That black cab resemblance was no accident. The standard taxi was a product of what would eventually become the Vehicle Production Group, or VPG. VPG was founded by Mark Klein and Patton Corrigan. Klein was a Chicago attorney who wanted to fill the market for purpose-built taxis, a market which had been vacant in the U.S. since the last Checker Motors Corporation vehicle rolled off the production line in 1982. Corrigan owned a fleet of some 3,000 cabs in Chicago and had considered importing the London cabs to the U.S. since those black cabs are wheelchair accessible. But the London cabs are not ADA compliant, and bringing them into compliance was cost prohibitive. Auto executive and future VPG CEO Mark Hogan suggested that Corrigan try purpose-building a cab for those with disabilities. Hogan was a former GM executive who was known for being one of GM's experts in lean manufacturing practices, which had been pioneered by Toyota. He spent time as the president of GM's Brazilian unit and as the general manager of small car operations. Hogan would also serve as president of Magna International, a large auto supplier group, so he knew his way around the auto industry. 2007 and 2008 were big years for the company. They secured $160 million in capital from merchant bank Perseus LLC at a time when financing was, well, tough to come by. It was around this time that the MV-1 was unveiled in its more rounded and complete form, refined from the sharp angularity of the standard taxi prototype. The VPG team had set out to produce a vehicle centered around the needs of those with disabilities, and in that they surely succeeded. They incorporated the input of wheelchair users and partnered with disability advocacy groups to ensure the MV-1 was optimized for their needs. That's why I have a hard time making fun of the MV-1's looks. The Pontiac Aztek is ugly because someone at GM thought this was a good idea. The MV-1 looks the way it does because it is serving the needs of those with limited mobility. The MV-1 has a 36-inch wide entryway, and the tall, flat roof made it easy to stand up and maneuver within the cabin. The vehicle featured a deployable ramp with a 1,200-pound weight limit. That ramp was stored under the floor, so the interior space remained uncluttered, and the floor itself was lower to the ground to aid access. The MV-1 came with a manually operated ramp as standard, but if you went for the deluxe variant, then you got a power-operated ramp. There was no front passenger seat, and there was enough room inside the MV-1 for someone in a wheelchair to turn around and position themselves next to the driver. If you equipped the optional jump seats, the MV-1 could accommodate up to 5 passengers. You could actually fit not one, but 2 wheelchair or scooter users in the MV-1 at the same time. VPG eventually announced that it had signed a contract with Indiana-based AM General to build the MV-1. The MV-1 was no longer an idea. VPG had crossed a major hurdle and had made it to production. AM General is perhaps best known for producing the military Humvee and later the civilian Hummer as well. The MV-1 was actually produced at the same plant that produced the H2 Hummer. The first production MV-1 rolled off the factory line in October of 2011 and sold for about $40,000, or about $58,000 today. That first model was delivered to football player Mark Buonaconti, who had suffered a spinal cord injury during a game. Another very important development came later that month when the New York Taxi and Limousine Commission approved the MV-1 as a yellow cab. AM General would later tout that the MV-1 was significantly cheaper to purchase than yellow cabs which had been converted to be accessible. Around this time, VPG and the MV-1 got a substantial amount of attention, including from the White House. A 2011 White House press release praised the MV-1's accessibility features as well as the vehicle's availability in a compressed natural gas variant. That natural gas version made up about 25% of MV-1's sales, and if you bought the natural gas version, the government offered a $4,000 tax credit. If you did not go for the CNG variant, you got a 4.6-liter Ford V8 that made, drumroll please, 248 horsepower. If you're liking the video, be sure to like and subscribe to Gas Guzzlers for more automotive content. Alright, let's continue with the story. The White House also noted that the MV-1 was being built in the US and complied with the Buy America Act, something that will cause some trouble later on. The MV-1 was not just assembled in America, 70% of its parts were US sourced. The White House press release noted that at the time, the baby boomer generation was starting to turn 65, so demand for accessible vehicles was expected to grow. The government didn't just praise VPG, it put its money where its mouth was. The Department of Energy provided VPG with an approximately $50 million loan. The loan was part of the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Program, which had also backed companies including Ford, Nissan, Tesla, and Fisker. VPG's loan was actually pretty tiny compared to the other recipients. The largest recipient, Ford, received $5.9 billion. Fisker also got quite a large sum at $529 million. A side note, the government would ultimately recoup $21 million from Fisker when they failed. If you'd like to see a future video on the Fisker fiasco, let me know in the comments below. By 2012, the company was getting off the ground. Sales numbers for the MV-1 are tough to come by, but press indicates VPG had sold at least 2,500 units by 2012, and VPG was projecting 6,000 unit sales in 2013. This growth was boosted by a change in government rules. Remember when I mentioned that the MV-1 complied with the Buy America Act? The Buy America Act of 1933 is a law requiring federal agencies to prefer domestically produced goods. Well, the MV-1 was one of the only disability-friendly vehicles that complied with that act. Thus, in 2012, when the U.S. Federal Transit Administration reversed a 2010 ruling that had waived Buy America Act rules for transit agencies receiving federal funds, they handed VPG a giant win. This greatly upset Chrysler, who had sold vans built in Canada and later converted to be accessible to transit agencies. Chrysler claimed that the decision to get rid of the waiver would give VPG a monopoly and cause prices to spike. The government dismissed Chrysler's concerns and noted that the waiver had nearly exclusively benefited Chrysler. It also was not fair to say that the FTA had handed VPG a monopoly, as the MV-1 would still compete against US-made Ford vans. While there was reason to be hopeful, there were some serious problems for the new company. While 2,500 units is certainly impressive for an early-stage automotive company, articles indicate that VPG was aiming for 15,000 to 20,000 units annually. Sales were certainly not aided by production troubles. In the summer of 2012, the company paused production to modify the production line so that they could produce the LX trim of the MV-1. The LX trim was a more luxurious variant of the MV-1 that was intended for personal use. However, the company would have trouble unpausing the production line and resuming MV-1 production. Low sales and pauses in production meant limited incoming revenue. In early 2013, the company's cash reserves fell below the amount required by their earlier Department of Energy loan, and VPG defaulted. Despite having over 2,000 orders waiting to be produced, the company had met its end and about 100 people lost their jobs. AM General approached the government and offered to acquire VPG as well as the $50 million loan. Specifics on the deal are scarce, but it seems they acquired everything for about $3 million. The Department of Energy was happy with this and signed the assets and liabilities over to AM General. In March 2014, AM General resumed production of the MV-1 and shipped about 2,000 units a year. AM General would make some worthy attempts to keep the MV-1 fresh. For the 2016 model year, the vehicle received a new 3.7-liter Ford V6 engine and 6-speed transmission. AM General also added a power passenger door, which, along with the power ramp, could be operated from the key fob. This feature greatly increased independence for wheelchair users. The MV-1, strangely enough, was being built on the same production line as the Chinese market Mercedes R-Class at this time. Reading press material from this time, it seems AM General was hoping that the MV-1 would catch on and replace all taxis, not just accessible taxis. This was not an unwarranted hope, as a lot of the features that make the MV-1 accessible also make it a great taxi. Having that large, flat interior with a high roof and wide opening doors, these are great qualities for a taxi. It also seems that the LX version, which had caused earlier manufacturing issues, was now being successfully produced. While the company was trying to push that LX model and more personal use of the MV-1, they of course wanted lots of taxi sales, and AM General marketed the MV-1 aggressively. They offered discounted pricing to New York City taxi drivers. Combining the AM General discount with various incentives from the New York Taxi and Limousine Commission meant that a driver could get an MV-1 for about $19,000, essentially half of the list price. Unfortunately, it seems that was not enough. The MV-1 did a respectable job, but producing a vehicle is expensive, and it seems that the MV-1 just did not meet the necessary sales requirements to warrant continued production because in 2016, AM General sold the factory where the MV-1 was being produced, and well, that was that. Through the years, AM General has been contacted by press and has at multiple times indicated that they were considering bringing back the MV-1 or researching the possibility, but it seems those efforts have not moved anywhere serious. With the MV-1 gone, there are still options for wheelchair users. As far as I can tell, in the US market, all of these options are conversions from minivans. I'm hopeful that the introduction of driverless vehicles will result in new options for those with limited mobility. I mean, there's just a lot more you can do with the packaging when you don't have to have a driver involved. While the MV-1 did not succeed, at least from a sales perspective, I believe it is worthy of praise. Those involved in the company saw a clear, underserved market, and they did something about it. And not only was it an underserved market, but it was a noble mission to help those with limited mobility get around. And I think that the world would probably be a lot better if more people took action like that. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Jake, you're watching Gas Guzzlers, and this has been the MV-1. Take care, everyone. Thank you all for watching. I know this is a bit different from our normal reviews, but if you've been around the channel for a while, you may remember that Pontiac story I did a few years back, and I really enjoyed making that, so I wanted to try something similar. And I don't have a place to store cars to review right now, so this is just something that's much more attainable. Let me know what you thought about this story. Would you like to see more documentary stories like this? Because I would like to try a Fisker one next. Also, I want to give a big shout out to the upcoming DC Auto Show. It's going to be in January and February of 2026. Make sure to sign up, guys. I'll have a link in the description. I hope to see you there. Alright, guys. Thanks so much for watching, for supporting the channel over the years. And I look forward to making some more videos and growing with you all.